anticipated and have to basically put more rules in his code. And we don't want an iterative process. I think there's too much stuff and so on. So he kind of threw in the towel on this. But one of the things we did learn was that there's a lot of different log messages, and it's pretty hard. So like I said, I haven't done a lot of work on this. I haven't found much work done on this, but there are a lot of things that I could learn more about and some other directions I could go. Natural language processing may be a way to approach this, or it might be using genetic sequencing algorithms, turning messages into basically a string of tokens and looking for fragments of strings of tokens that match between messages in different locations, which is similar to what genetic sequencing does. Genetic sequencing does it with very long strings of very few tokens. I would be doing this with relatively short strings of a lot more different kinds of tokens. So that's basically where I'm at. This is more of a problem statement than a solution. I don't have a solution, but I know what I want to get. If people have ideas or recommendations, or somebody wants to make this work for me, that would be fine with me. Because then I can get to the fun stuff, which is the data mining. Because I'm hoping to actually learn some new things about logs, learn some new ways to analyze them, so that we can do better intrusion detection, better forensics, even just better system administration, and things like that. And that's it. And questions?
Questions? Could you go into a little more detail what you meant by using natural language processing in the...
Not much, because at the moment I don't know a lot about natural language processing. If Victor has something he wants to add, that would be better.
Natural processing will definitely be helpful here. The problem is that it is, as you know, pretty time consuming to create. Basically, you need to create a syntax and the lexicon. That is what defeats this procedure that your friend Mark was trying to do, is that there is variation in the actual incidence of tokens. But if we could generalize from that into what it is syntactically, chances are that this variation of tokens would not affect the actual pattern. That is, we would recognize the pattern, we would understand that it is there are these variabilities. Like, for instance, to give you an example, which I don't think will occur in the law. If we know in natural language that in this sentence, like an English sentence, it should typically start with a noun. To use my own name, you may start sentences about something I did, or more typically forgot to do, with Victor. Now, if we put Victor in the pattern, we'll find on the references to Victor. But sentences which begin with core, your name, will be recognized as a different type, but they shouldn't be. And so Victor and core should be put in the same category. Moreover, the pattern should allow for Victor and core and any other group of nouns or whatever. So this is what needs to be done. And using straightforward syntactic categories will not help. You need to use the categories, the concepts from the logs, from the Syslogs. That is, like for instance, it's clear that any two sequences of numbers are not created equal. We must recognize a certain specially formatted sequence as an IP address. That's definitely a category. And so there will be patterns which have an IP address. Maybe it's just one pattern. Maybe there are more patterns. So basically, you need to be able to recognize every item, say between the blanks. That is a word. It's simplification. In some cases, it has to be like a sequence of two or more words. We must recognize them as a syslog concept. Have an inventory of those, and then you can go over every message and recognize it as belonging to a certain type. This will definitely work. Because it has always worked. The question is whether it can be scaled down to something other than your inventory of every single word occurring in your terabyte of messages. Whether something can be done like on a certain small corpus of it, and then statistically or otherwise extrapolated to the rest. That is, do a little bit by hand, and then trying to generalize from this tagged corpus, as we call it, to the untagged corpus. So there are definitely possibilities, but it's emulating NLP techniques rather than doing the actual NLP. Am I making any sense?
So the problem exists before even the semantic layer. It exists more at sentential or syntactic.
Well, yeah, I mean, to do anything that is direct, at this point, he doesn't really need to understand what every message is. He just wants to have a pattern for it.
I just want to sort them out.
Yes, as I mentioned on the basis of our exchanges, I maintain that it's never enough. You really want to understand the content, and it is not much more of an effort. Normally, you sit and wait until the researchers understand it by themselves, because otherwise they won't believe you.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry if you had gone over this already. I just want to know, what do you expect to gain by mining Syslog data over other data, like for example, just the system call traces or the network traces? What do you think that you'll gain additionally? What is the advantage?
Okay, let me say more what I hope to gain. I hope to learn something like what would be really cool is if I could discover patterns that indicated intrusions that I never knew happened on my systems, for instance. I don't know if I'll find that or not, but I won't find it until I go looking for the things until I have something that shows me the things I don't know about. So for instance, there's that. Also, things like looking at process accounting or system call traces. Well, system call traces aren't things that people normally record in terms of administering systems, but people do normally collect log information. So, like I said, I have data. I continue to collect data. A lot of information is in there already. So, I'm just trying to find a way to get it out. And system call traces show you certain things, but I think there's other things they don't show you. One of the things they don't show you is some of the interpretation of activity. What some log messages tell you is the interpretation of an activity. And I'm going to reverse it after I said all kinds of bad things about programmers. If they write good log messages, the log message is actually telling you what's actually happening, not just a sequence of events occurring.
Have anybody in the group worked with Professor Carla broadly in electrical and computer engineering? Unfortunately, we have lost her to Tufts. She was doing something similar, called data mining, without this categorization that Abe feels he needs. She looked at the statistical properties of Syslogs for one individual user, and trying to capture unusual patterns which would indicate that it may be an intrusion detection with somebody stealing the password or whatever, somebody pretending to be this user and doing something very unusual. So this is a kind of a similar activity, but it is simpler because with Carla's material, it is one individual user who is doing things.
And it's a relatively small amount of messages that she's looking at.
Right, and sort of in the same.
Yeah, so it's actually, you can do it by hand because it's a small amount of different messages.